Where legends breathe again. Eld myth. In the silent, forgotten vaults beneath our collective memory, other stories wait. Not the polished tales offered for comfort and doctrine, but older, stranger visions. They are the drafts that were discarded, the paintings whitewashed by orthodoxy, the theological paths that led into shadows too deep to be mapped. These are not myths of gentle guidance, but of raw cosmic machinery and moral vertigo. They speak of a universe where the scales of justice were tipped from the very start, where the afterlife was a vast, hollow echo long before it became a furnace, and where the most pivotal of divine journeys was whispered, not proclaimed. To encounter these stories is to stand before a sealed door in the foundation of belief and hear, from the other side, the echoes of what was meant to be forgotten. They share a single, chilling theme: the terrifying possibility that the spiritual cosmos, in its original blueprint, operated on principles of relentless law, not unconditional love, and that our most enduring images of damnation and salvation are but faded copies of a far more complex and far more frightening original text. The journey of the soul, as taught in quiet corners, was not a peaceful sleep. Before the tidy heavens and hells of medieval pageantry, early Christian mystics and heterodox sects saw a gauntlet. Imagine the moment of death not as a gentle departure, but as a violent extraction. The soul, a luminous, fragile thing, is ripped from the failing body into an air thick with predatory silence. It does not fly upward, but is dragged, compelled toward a landscape of moral architecture. This is the vision from texts like the Apocalypse of Peter or the Acts of Thomas, the soul facing not a single judge, but a series of toll houses, each a celestial customs office manned not by angels, but by accusatory spirits. These are the telonia, the tax collectors of the air. The atmosphere is one of bureaucratic horror. Each toll house corresponds to a sin: deceit, envy, fornication, pride. The air in these zones hums with the remembered echoes of those failings. The soul must account for itself, its memories made manifest. Fail the reckoning at the station of hatred, and the attendant spirits, shadowy, formless, yet sharp of intent, claim their due, their touch like acid on the soul's substance, tearing away pieces of its light. This is punishment as precise, surgical dismemberment. The geography of the afterlife is a refining fire, but not of mere flame. It is a fire of exposure, where every hidden thought and secret act becomes a weight, an anchor dragging the soul down into a specific, tailored desolation. It was graphic, personal, and terrifyingly merit-based, a system so intricate and violent it threatened to reduce divine mercy to a mere loophole in a vast legal code. It was a vision of salvation earned through desperate, moment-by-moment moral accounting, and it was too visceral, too administratively grim, for an evolving church that sought to offer universal hope. It was sealed away, leaving only the simpler, if more brutal metaphor of eternal fire. Long before the sermonizers spoke of lakes of fire, the dead went to a place called Sheol. Forget heat, forget the rage of demons. Think instead of cold, of profound silence, of weight. Sheol is not a punishment, it is a state. It is the Hebrew underworld, a realm of shadows situated deep beneath the foundations of the world. To descend there, one did not need to be wicked, only mortal. It was the great democracy of death. Picture a landscape of inverted mountains and caverns so vast their ceilings are like night skies. A gray, twilight illumination, source unknown, casts no warmth. The Rephaim, the shades of the dead, dwell here. They are not tormented but diminished. They move through the dust with a whisper, their forms like smoke, their strength gone, their memories leaching away like water into sand. The air is still and smells of dry clay and forgotten things. There is no conversation, only echoes of sighs. This is the true original hell, not a furnace but a refrigerator, a place where the soul is not burned but frozen in a state of eternal passive fading. God's power, it was believed, could reach even here, but his presence was a distant rumor. In Sheol, praise is silenced. Connection is severed. It is existence stripped of all that gives it meaning: action, relationship, the presence of the divine. This vision was erased not because it was too frightening, but because it was not frightening enough. A shadowy rest for all, regardless of virtue, offered no leverage for moral coercion, no thrilling narrative of justice served. Later theology needed a sharper dichotomy, a cleaner divide between the rewarded and the punished. So the cold, silent Sheol was split, its upper levels becoming a waiting room for the righteous, its lower depths inflating with borrowed imagery from Greek Tartarus and Zoroastrianism, igniting into the hellfire we recognize today. The original, chilling neutrality of the grave was lost to a doctrine of eternal, active retribution. Now turn your eye from the realms of the dead to the court of the living God. Among the divine assembly there stands a figure whose name would become a synonym for evil, Satan. The title is not a name but a job description, the adversary, or more precisely, the accuser. In the heavenly courtroom, bathed in a light so pure it reveals every flaw, this being serves as the celestial prosecutor. His role, outlined in the book of Job, is one of cosmic quality assurance. He walks to and fro on the earth, not to tempt but to audit, to test the integrity of creation, specifically the fidelity of humankind. He is the necessary shadow in the court of absolute light, the one who asks the uncomfortable question: is their piety genuine, or is it a transaction for your blessing? Imagine this scene: a vast celestial throne room of impossible geometry and blinding crystalline light. The accuser approaches the divine bench. He is not a horned monster but an angelic bureaucrat, his countenance severe, his eyes holding the cold, clear focus of a diamond. He presents his case against a human soul, laying out the evidence of hypocrisy, fear, and hidden failure. There is no malice here, only a relentless commitment to the law. He is the personification of divine justice without mercy, a function that must exist for free will to have any weight. This Satan was an integral part of the system, a loyal, if grim, servant. But this nuanced role was unstable. A God who encompasses all must also encompass judgment. But for believers, it became psychologically untenable to worship a deity who personally prosecuted them. The accuser had to be externalized, cast out, transformed from a function of God's own justice into its rebellious enemy. The prosecutor was fired, then framed. His court was dissolved, and he was reassigned to rule the newly renovated furnace of Gehenna, his legalistic nature morphing into a persona of pure, petulant malice. The uncomfortable truth, that the source of judgment and the source of love might originate in the same will, was buried beneath a simpler story of rebellion and war. This leads us to the most haunting implication of all: a covenant without a safety net. Early strands of Christian thought, particularly those tinged with the starkness of Jewish apocalypticism and Gnostic urgency, presented a chillingly straightforward eschatology. The world was a measured field, the law was a sharp sickle, and the harvest would be absolute. In this framework, mercy was not a guaranteed dispensation. It was a rare, almost inexplicable exception. The default destination for humanity, tainted by the primordial fault, was condemnation. Paint this scene. The final judgment is not a weighing of deeds, but a reading of a verdict already written in the fabric of a fallen world. The saved are not a joyful multitude, but a tiny, bewildered remnant, pulled from the brink of a precipice that yawns for everyone else. The atmosphere is one of cosmic inevitability. The great valley of Jehoshaphat is not filled with the murmur of waiting souls, but with the silent, crushing weight of certainty. The light from the throne is not welcoming, but exposes everything to its core. In this schema, Christ's sacrifice was not a blanket pardon, but a narrow, perilous bridge over a chasm that almost no one could find, let alone cross. It was a theology of scarcity, where grace was a drop of water in a spiritual desert. This vision proved too existentially terrifying to sustain a global faith. It bred despair, not piety. So doctrine softened. The concept of purgatory emerged as a middle ground. The idea of God's universal salvific will was emphasized. The terrifying, exclusive bridge was widened into a broad road, with the old, narrow path relegated to the footnotes of extremists and mystics. The forgotten judgment whispers the unthinkable, that the universe might have been designed, initially, with a salvage operation so minor it verged on the inconsequential. And yet, into the heart of this forgotten, neutral, or legally condemned underworld, there comes a story of rupture, the harrowing of hell. This is the hidden, explosive coda to the Passion narrative, detailed in the Gospel of Nicodemus and echoed in ancient liturgies. It is the tale of what Christ did in the 3 days between his death and resurrection. He did not rest. He descended. Not as a soul, but as a conquering king in spirit, shattering the very gates of Sheol, Hades, or whichever realm held the dead. Imagine the silence of that gray realm suddenly shattered by a sound it had never known, the sound of living, divine footfalls on its dusty floor. A light that is not gray twilight, but the color of sunrise and victory, floods the caverns. The Rephaim, the shades who had known only decay and forgetting, feel a warmth they cannot comprehend. The accuser of old, now the warden of this place, finds the roles reversed. He is the one put on trial, his authority broken. And Christ, in a moment of unimaginable theological drama, does not preach to them. He seizes. He liberates. He takes by authority the souls of the righteous dead, Adam and Eve, the patriarchs, the prophets, and leads them in a triumphant procession out of the prison of death. This was the original victory over death, not an empty tomb alone, but a sacked fortress. Yet this story was minimized. It was rendered as an icon, a symbol, its raw militaristic conquest of the afterlife softened. Why? Because it was too radical. It implied that salvation was not merely offered from this point forward, but retroactively applied, challenging simple linear justice. It showed God violently invading the realm of the dead, which complicated the tidy afterlife geography being built. It was a myth of chaos and revolution in the order of the cosmos, and while it was too powerful to erase completely, it was confined to art and obscure liturgy. Its full, earth-shaking implications kept quiet. Let us pause here, in the silence after the procession has left. The broken gates of the underworld stand open. The gray light of Sheol slowly seeps back, reclaiming the empty caverns. Above, on the surface of the world, the roots of great, ancient trees push down into the stone, tasting the echoes of what transpired below. A cold wind moves through forgotten forest ruins at dusk, carrying the scent of wet earth and old stone. It is a wind that has passed over desert hermits, through the empty naves of deconsecrated churches, and across the pages of closed books in locked libraries. It knows the shape of the stories we have just walked through. In the deepening blue of twilight, standing stones cast long shadows that seem less like absence and more like openings. These landscapes hold the memory. The chill in the air is not just the coming night. It is the residual cold of the original grave. The faint, distant flicker of firelight from a lone window on a hillside is a fragile beacon against the vast, neutral dark, a testament to the desperate need to replace that cold with heat, even the heat of torment, just to feel that something awaits. The atmosphere itself is the keeper of the forbidden text. When laid side by side, these 5 censored visions do not contradict each other. They conspire. They form a coherent and far more terrifying alternative scripture. They describe a cosmic order that is fundamentally juridical, not paternal. In this hidden narrative, the soul is prosecuted by a divine official, endures a brutal, personalized post-mortem audit, and faces a default judgment of condemnation, all before being consigned to a silent, fading oblivion that predates the idea of punitive fire. The harrowing of hell is the stunning, anomalous crack in this system, a divine jailbreak that feels almost like a retcon, a revision to the original, grim plan. The suppression of these elements was not arbitrary. It was a theological necessity. A faith-seeking mass conversion and social stability could not preach a God whose justice was so meticulous and severe that mercy seemed an afterthought. It could not sustain followers with the chill of Sheol. It needed the motivational clarity of heaven versus hell, the relatable villainy of a rebel Satan, and the assured comfort of guaranteed grace for the faithful. The hidden myths reveal the raw scaffolding, a universe run on law, entropy, and judgment. The approved doctrine presents the furnished home, a universe run on love, justice, and redemption. We chose the warmer story, but the cold draft from the foundation never entirely goes away. These ghosts of doctrine did not die, they migrated. They seeped into the substratum of our culture, appearing wherever our art explores the grim, the bureaucratic, and the inescapably unjust. The toll houses of the soul find their echo in the layered, personalized hells of Dante, and in modern horror's obsession with punishment fitting the crime, from Hellraiser to Silent Hill. The cold, existential dread of Sheol permeates the bleak afterlives of films like Flatliners or What Dreams May Come, and the empty, shadowy realms of countless video games. The accuser, the divine prosecutor, lives on in characters like Bloodborne's Jayaman or any narrative of a relentless, inhuman investigator serving a higher law. The terror of the forgotten judgment, the fear of a universe rigged against us, fuels dystopian fiction and cosmic horror, from Kafka to Lovecraft. And the harrowing, that myth of glorious invasion, is the template for every story of a hero storming the underworld, from Orpheus to Doom's Slayer. These forbidden myths gave us the vocabulary for a darker kind of transcendence. They are the reason why the most compelling visions of the afterlife in our culture are rarely the sunny, cloud-strewn paradises, but the intricate, terrifying, and morally complex infernos. They satisfy a deep, unconscious knowledge that the spiritual world, if it exists, must be as terrifying and vast as it is merciful. What then do these hidden drafts of heaven and hell reveal about us? They are a mirror held up to our most profound fear, not of pain but of meaninglessness, not of punishment but of an uncaring architecture. The violent afterlife, the legalistic Satan, the silent Sheol, the scarce salvation, they all depict a cosmos where outcomes are earned, calculated, and final. There is no room for sentiment. This is the universe as an equation. And humanity, it seems, could not bear the answer that equation might provide. So we rewrote the story. We introduced narrative grace. We personified evil to give chaos a face we could fight. We replaced the silent, cooling grave with the roaring, purposeful fire. We did not hide these myths because they were false. We hid them because they were too true to assert terrifying logic. They expose the razor's edge faith walks between comforting its adherents and describing a reality that may be fundamentally indifferent to our need for comfort. They remind us that our sacred stories are, in part, shelters we built against the sheer, awful scope of the possible divine. We censored the raw, apocalyptic data and published the user-friendly guide. But the original dataset, with all its terrifying variables, is still recoverable. It lingers in the silence between the verses, in the chill that precedes the fear of fire, in the uneasy sense that mercy is a miracle precisely, because it is not mandated by the original design. So the next time you feel an inexplicable chill as night falls, or sense a vast, watching silence in an empty place, or dream of hallways that lead to closed doors behind which you can hear the sound of scales, remember, the stories are not gone. The accuser may have been reassigned, but the function of accusation remains woven into the fabric of conscience. Sheol's silence is the baseline quiet underneath all the noise of paradise and damnation. The harrowing's broken gates are still open, a permanent wound in the wall between death and something else. These are the older songs, sung in a lower register. They hum in the foundations of our cathedrals and our philosophies. They are the shadow to our light, the law to our grace, the cold equation to our warm story. They wait, not in hell, but in the forgotten corners of possibility. And perhaps in our deepest moments of moral reckoning or existential dread, we are not facing the devil or even God, but rather the first draft of everything. The tape of the cosmos has edits, but the original cut is still on file. Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.